on Dr. Natascha Wesch. She obtained her PhD in sports psychology and earned a postdoc in rehabilitation psychology. She earned her master's degree in exercise physiology and biochem. And she also earned an undergraduate degree in exercise science from Concordia. So Natascha, she's a member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association, and she is a consultant. And she consults not only with players, but also with coaches, so from all facets of life. Natascha and I actually played hockey together. We played on the varsity women's hockey team for the University of Western Ontario, and we also played last year for seniors AA London team, so we're a force to be reckoned with. Aside from that, she also played for Team Canada's rugby for 11 years, and aside from also being a player, this is her 18th season coaching the women's Western rugby team. She's led them to many Ontario championships, as well as 2 back-to-back national championships. She's coached Team Canada's under-17 and under-19 rugby team, and also led them to a World Championship in Dubai in 2009. So we're delighted to have Natascha with us today, and let's give a warm welcome to her.
Thank you very much. Is this too loud or is that okay? Perfect volume? Awesome. I'm very excited to be here. I love talking about something I'm very passionate about, sports psychology, and today what I'm going to talk about is imagery in sport, but imagery in performance really. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I know Katrina just obviously did that, but so that's me at Concordia University. That's where just a year before I attended Concordia to do my undergrad, I started playing rugby, and then at Concordia University, I started with the varsity team. Now, what led me to sports psychology is along the way, I started getting involved with the national program, and rugby is a sport where it's almost impossible to avoid being injured at some point. And so I had numerous injuries, one of which forced me to have surgery, shoulder surgery, and I didn't want to lose my spot on the national team. I didn't want to have the youngins take my spot. I was fairly competitive, still am, and I just didn't want anybody to take my spot, and I knew I needed to do something because every time I thought of playing, I thought my shoulder's going to come out. I just had surgery. It's going to be fixed, but it's going to come out, and I don't want that to happen. So I ended up working with a sports psychologist and started really getting into reading books about sports psychology and how to train the mind, how to use the mind to enhance performance. And that's how I got into sports psychology, ended up going to doing a PhD in sports psychology. So now I take my work and apply it with athletes and teams, and currently working with Rowing Canada and their program, and Rowing Ontario and a number of other teams, London Knights as well, and I love what I do. So what I wanted to do, like I said today, is to share with you some information on imagery in sport. Right between here, the 6 inches between your ears, is the most powerful thing that you've been given as a human being. And unfortunately, for most of us, it's untapped. And Yogi Berra, I think, said it quite well. He said that half of sport is 90% mental, although the math doesn't add up there. It is 90% mental, or 80%, or whatever number. One of the things that happens, though, is that in sport, and I think in other areas of performance, is we spend so much time training the technical, the tactical, and the physical side, and we leave the mental side to chance. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is a lot of people don't really know how to train the mind. But it's actually quite simple, because the mind responds to training in the exact same way as the rest of your body responds to training. Thing is, it's kind of boring to say that, well, I'm going to sit here and think, and I'm going to sit here and imagine. It's way more exciting to go and do. And that's why we tend to go with that path of training the physical, training the technical, those skills, and the tactical before we train the mind. I'm going to share with you how imagery, in this case, can be used to enhance performance. So I use the word imagery because most people hear the word visualization, and it's a more common word. Visualization implies the visual sense, which is great. It's our most dominant sense. But imagery is greater than that. I call it the superhero of visualization. It's got more power. Imagery, basically, you're involving all the senses. So you're involving sight, sound, touch, I'd say feel, but the kinesthetic awareness, as well as smell and taste. Sometimes smell and taste don't really apply in sport. It's irrelevant what the hockey arena smells like. Well, actually, no. But it doesn't really apply as much as some of the other senses. But that's the difference between visualization and imagery. So when I talk about imagery, I'm talking about utilizing all the senses when you're thinking about something. So we all imagine, right? And in fact, we do it every day. Some of us daydream. Hopefully nobody's doing that right now. And we all dream. Some of us remember them, some of us don't. How many of you have had the dream where you're falling? Put up your hand. 99% of the population? Yeah. What happens? What happens when you wake up? And what else? What happens inside the body? What do you feel? Adrenaline, scared.
Relief.
What's that?
Relief.
You believe? You're a relief that you woke up? It is a relief that you woke up. But that wasn't really happening. It was all in your mind, right? But what your mind saw, your mind assumed was reality, right? And it wasn't just that you thought about it. Your whole body responded as if it was really happening. And that's the beauty of the mind. Whatever you put on your mental movie screen, for all intents and purposes, your body thinks that it's happening at that moment. And your body will react as if it is. Proof in that falling dream. Okay? And there's also proof in terms of research that's been done. In fact, research that's been done looking at the brain and functional magnetic resonance imagery, fMRI, let's make it simple. The research that's been done in that area has shown that when a person imagines, for example, playing tennis, all the systems, the areas in the brain that are responsible for the motor activity of actually doing those skills get fired, just not at the same intensity. Right? So everything's happening in the same order that it would if you were actually doing that activity. You're just imagining it. So the implications in terms of imagery are huge in terms of performance. Right? So, reality versus fiction. Is it really real, what we're doing? If I'm just imagining playing tennis, if I'm just imagining playing hockey, if I'm just imagining my performance that I'm about to take if I were a ballerina, which I'm not. If I were just imagining that, is that really real? What's real? Isn't real whatever we interpret? However we see the world, and that's how we interpret the world, through our senses. Right? So it's real to us, therefore it's real. All right. So, mind-body connection. This is research summed up in a very small diagram. Essentially, what you feel, what you think, and what you imagine, the thoughts and the images that go through your mind will be associated with feelings. Sad, angry, happy, a feeling. Because we attach feelings to pretty much everything that we experience. The feelings, and the way that our body works, feelings and how we communicate, or how our body communicates is through chemicals. Right? I feel something, certain chemicals get released, and it impacts the way I perform. Everybody's heard of the stress hormone cortisol. Yes? Right? The fight or flight response. Okay? So what happens when I'm in a dark alley, and there's a sound that's behind me, and I turn around and there's nothing there, and then I start walking a little faster, but the sound sounds like there's footsteps behind me? What's happening in my body? For most people, for me, stress hormone. It's getting released. What does cortisol do? Darren, I'm going to pick on you. What does cortisol do to your performance, to your muscles, for example, or to your breathing? Yeah. So it's a good thing to a certain extent, right? It's a good thing because it'll allow me to turn around, and if there's this big beast, I'm either going to punch him in the head and or run, right? It gives me the energy to do that right away, right? That's a great thing. But here's what happens when we think about negative things. Negative things, that cortisol, that anxiety comes in. But instead of this big flush of cortisol, it's little drips. Just comes in a little bit so it stays in your system. Well, if I have a little bit of cortisol in my system, there's always that tightness, a little bit of tightness. My breath isn't the way it needs to be. So that hockey player that all of a sudden is going down the breakaway, God, I hope I don't miss this net. I hope I don't miss. What happens? A little bit of tension, he misses, yeah. Grips the stick just a little tighter, everything changes. Everything he knows how to do changes because he grips the stick a little tighter, right? So the way that you perform starts with what you think of and what you imagine, or can be affected with what you think of and imagine in your mind. What you think will be associated to what you feel. What you feel, chemicals get released which impact performance. Let me give you an example. Okay? So, think happy stuff. Not happy like, I'm the best, I'm awesome, this is fantastic. Good things like, I can score. I know that I can make this shot. All I have to do is shoot right there, follow through, and everything will take care of itself. I can't control the goalie, but I can control what I do. That will create a completely different chemical setup in my body. Positive chemicals, confidence, I'm going to perform, or I'm not going to stay tight, right? The flip side, I think bad things, completely different chemical reaction. Now in the body, good and bad chemicals, I can't really classify them as that, but in terms of performance, there are good, more performance-enhancing chemicals that get released in the body, and then there are performance, or chemicals that take away from performance. Okay? So the thing is then, is that you can actually control what goes on in here. You can control what goes on in your mind. Most people don't. Most people just let information flow and they just respond to whatever happens. But you can control what you think. And the great thing is if you think of your brain as a GPS, that's essentially, to simplify it, that's essentially how your brain works. How do you use a GPS? If you want to go to Windsor, most people know how, but let's say I don't know how to go to Windsor. What do I plug into the GPS? Where I want to go. Correct. Do I plug in, don't go to Sarnia? You laugh. I could, but is it going to take me to Windsor? No, it's just not going to take me to Sarnia, although that's not how the GPS works. Right? So, but think about that in terms of performance. What happens if I ask an athlete, what do you want to do? What makes you perform well? Or what do you want to do in this game? Well, I don't want to fall. Think of the gymnast. I don't want to fall. Okay, well if you plug in I don't want to fall, what will happen? You will fall because you're not telling your mind and your body what you want it to do. So you're not going to get to the destination that you want, which is staying on the beam, for example. So you need to plug in what you want to do. Same thing with the images. Okay? So if you think of your mind as a GPS, sometimes it makes it a little simpler. So, the dark alley image that I was telling you about, I want you to experience it. So, what I want you to do, and you're going to humor me on this one, I want you to close your eyes. Don't look around to see if other people are closing their eyes. They're closing their eyes. Close your eyes, just humor me. I'll wake you up. Okay? Close your eyes. I want you to imagine yourself in a dark alley. So there's been a recent rainfall. And you can see the reflection of the moon in a few puddles. But apart from that, it's essentially dark. Now you can hear your footsteps as you walk. But you hear a small noise, you're not sure what it is, behind you. So you stop. You turn around slowly. There's nothing there. Okay, so you turn around and walk. Keep walking. But now you pick up the pace a little bit. You're walking a little bit faster. Now that sound sounds like footsteps. The faster you walk, the faster the footsteps get. Now you start to run. You run. You try to get to the end of the alleyway. But it seems like the faster you run, the further the outside, the further the exit is. All right, open your eyes. What happened? What happened? Those of you that actually were able to get into it, what happened? Your heart rate went up. Yes. Anybody else? Just blurt it out. I got this. Yes.
Sweating and quivering?
Sweating and quivering, yes.
Yeah, shaking.
Shaking, yeah. Yeah. What else?
Mind starts to race.
Your mind starts to race.
My breath.
Your breath?
Yeah, it was different.
It was different. Okay? You just imagined it. You weren't actually there. You created the image. Yes?
And the muscles tightened up because of the rigidity and the
Yeah.
fear.
When you imagine running, right? Absolutely.
Tense.
You started to get tense. You just controlled your mind. You just controlled what you put in to your GPS. You just controlled it. Right? You can do this on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. But it requires practice. And this is what I meant at the beginning when I said that the mind and the body are trained in the exact same way. How do you train your body? How do you get stronger? What do? You go to the gym. You lift weight. Do you just lift weight once as much as you can and then that's it? I'm going to go to the Olympic weightlifting competition and I'm good to go? No. Repetition. Progression. I start small and I build. I stress my body a little bit, just enough that I don't go over the top, but that I force my body to adapt. The mind trains the same way. Okay? So how do you do it? So again, we interact with the world through our senses. So that's the critical piece. If you're going to use, and we're talking about imagery here, if you're going to use imagery, brackets, visualization, superhero, if we're going to use imagery, you need to incorporate all the senses. Okay? So you need to see, obviously, and that's the easiest one to do. You need to hear. You need to feel, touch, but there's also that kinesthetic awareness, what your body's doing in space, what it feels like. And then smell and taste. And yes, I know that's a really freaky image, and that's why I like putting it up there. Okay? So, here's what I want you to try. I want you to pick your favorite sport or physical activity, or if you don't have one, walking is fine. All right? This is the last time I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. So I want you to close your eyes again. And I want you to see yourself in the environment where you would perform that activity. So if you are performing a certain sport, what does that environment look like? Just pay attention to what you see around you as you imagine that environment. Now, I want you to try to pick up any sounds that you might hear, typically in that environment. So in a hockey arena, you might hear skate blades on the ice, carving through the ice. You might hear a slap shot. In the weight room, you might hear dumbbells and plates banging, grunting. If you're skiing, you might hear the snow under the skis. If you're walking, you hear your footsteps, but possibly also if you're outside, the wind or the breeze going through the leaves. What do you hear? Now pay attention to what your body feels like as it's moving through space. So if you're walking, what do your muscles feel like? What do your legs feel like? What are your arms doing? If you're skating, if you're playing a sport, whatever it is, pay attention to your muscles in your body as it moves through space. Now, if appropriate, what does it smell like? Are there any smells? There are certainly smells when you look at hockey. Swimming, the chlorine. If you're a golfer, smell of freshly cut grass. And again, if applicable, is there a taste? Now put it all together. Now when you're ready to leave that place, take your time, but when you're ready to leave that place, bring your focus back to here. All right, so this is the point where I lose people because they're actually asleep. All right, so let me ask you this. Was that easier than when I asked you to do the dark alley thing?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Familiar.
It's familiar. What else? What's that?
Comfort.
Comfort. Yeah?
Okay, it was more euphoria and joy,
Yeah, because this is something that you know, that you like and enjoy doing.
and it was maybe a historic moment.
Like you won a gold medal at the Olympics.
Oh, like hitting a walk-off home run when the World Series, you know, the roar of the fans.
Yeah.
And the teammates.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. Again, you can imagine whatever you want, right? Here's what happened in your body and in your brain and the whole nervous system, so the neuromuscular system. I'll break it down, make it as easy as possible without throwing out all kinds of research. But essentially, we've all walked outside when there's a fresh coat of snow, and apparently it's snowing right now. So when we walk outside and there's a fresh coat of snow, like when it really snows, nobody's walked on it yet, and you walk and create a path in the snow. What happens to the snow? It's packed down, yeah? What happens when you walk on that path over and over and over and over again? It becomes, there's a rut, it becomes really, really packed down, right? Yeah? At the end of the winter, in the spring, when the snow melts, what's the last snow to melt? The one that was packed down. It's always the path that's left, right? Okay? That's how it works in your brain and your body. Not really, but that's the easiest way to explain it. Okay? So the more times I imagine something or I do something, the more times I pack down the snow. Imagery will do the same thing as if I were actually practicing or doing it physically. It will pack down the snow. It will make it more concrete, and it will stick longer in my mind. In fact, it will never leave. So, the athlete or the performer or the artist that practices physically and then imagines with all their senses, they're packing down the snow. Same thing though, if I'm a hockey player or any other type of athlete, I'm a hockey player, I go and I make a mistake on the ice. Mistakes happen. In fact, that's the joy of sport. If you look at it in a positive way, it's the joy of sport. Because you get to fix things, you get to be better, you get to learn. But if I come back to the bench and I go over and over in my mind the shot that I missed and how I felt, and I go over and over and over again in my mind, what am I doing?
Psyching yourself out.
Psyching myself out. More importantly, I'm packing down the snow for that behavior.
Okay,
Yes.
I was going to say it could become learned helplessness, like it plays over in the mind, just like a hitter go for it at slumps middle.
Absolutely, there is a slump, because now, if I break it down really simply, next time I'm out there ready to take a shot, what's been ingrained in my mind? The mistake that I made, the pattern, right? Whereas if I could come off the ice, and instead of playing that shot over and over again that I missed, I say, okay, what would I have done differently? You know what? I was really gripping the stick. I was aiming to not miss, as opposed to aiming to score. So I replay it in my mind, and I see myself picking the top corner, and I see myself shooting and scoring, and I repeat it. So now, if I go back to the snow analogy, I come out, fresh coat of snow, I pick this path, that's the missing the net path. All right, don't pick that path, so don't walk over it again. Pick a new path. Here's a new one, I create a new path. Now I walk over this one 3 or 4 or 5 times. Which path am I going to take next time I come to that situation? The one that's kind of packed down or the one that's firmly packed down? It's going to be a lot easier to go down this one. Okay? Does that make sense? So, incorporating all of the senses. So what about application? Well, there's a bunch of different ways in terms of what research has shown in the way that you can apply imagery. All right? And you can put in different combinations. Technique and strategy. So if I'm learning something new, again, I use sports because that's my point of reference. If I'm learning something new, if I'm learning how to do a cartwheel on the beam, I can rehearse that. Not just rehearse seeing it, but feeling it. What do my hands feel like when my hands touches the beam? Where do I grip? What muscles do I tense? What do I need to focus on? So working with a gymnast, I might say, okay, do something simple as a handstand. Do a handstand. Now, before you do it again, what part of the handstand do you really need to focus on in order for you to accomplish that skill and make it better or make it stick? Well, I really need to squeeze my knees. Okay, imagine yourself squeezing your knees. Now, go and do it. The handstand will be a lot better. Because it's like I've primed the brain to do what it needs to do. Okay? So you can use imagery for technique, skill development, or skill rehearsal. Same thing for strategy or decision making. And this is the fun thing. One of the things that I love doing is working with goaltenders. Right? Because they've got all kinds of scenarios coming at them, and then they have to make a decision. So here's an example. I'm a goaltender standing in my crease, and I've got a play coming at me. So I imagine the play coming at me, but then I can pause the video because it's my video. It's a video that's in my own mind. I can pause it. So I pause the video. When I pause the video, I now kind of take myself out of the video and I look. That guy shoots with his left. That guy shoots with his right. We've got my own defender coming down here. The possible scenario is that guy can shoot, that guy can pass. If he passes, this is what I need to do. I need to push and slide over this way. Now, play it out. I redo the scenario, but now I have a different defender. Maybe my defender is now backed in already and it's a 2-on-1 as opposed to a 2-on-0. I replay that and I pick up on all the visual cues. So what will happen to that goaltender when they come to play is that they're now going to have a lot more visual cues that they've paid attention to that are naturally going to come up. They're not even going to have to pay attention to them. Their brain is going to start picking up on those things without even knowing it. So when I work with athletes, they start to say, oh, there's a whole bunch of more lucky bounces. It's like I'm getting the puck a lot faster. It's like things are happening for me. No, you're creating them. You're making them happen for yourself. Okay? So you can also use that, for example, if I'm doing a whole full routine in gymnastics. Go through the whole routine. What might happen? How do I link my movements together? How do I link the part where I do my tumbling line to where I move into more choreography piece? Okay? Relaxation and focus. Let's look at relaxation for a second. A lot of times athletes and performers the night before a performance, might get nervous. Right? You can control your mind and therefore impact the way your body is and relax it. Okay? So some people, I get them to imagine their favorite place. It's like their happy place. Cottage. Somewhere really relaxing. Bring in all the senses. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you hear? Possibly what do you smell and taste? And the body relaxes. And if my mind is a GPS and I follow that thought process, then I can only plug in one thing at a time. And if I'm thinking about relaxing in my cottage, I'm definitely not thinking of the giant team I'm playing against tomorrow that's probably going to crush me into the boards. Plus, that's probably not a productive thought anyways. Right? So I'm now relaxed. I've changed my total internal chemistry in my body, and it's allowing me to sleep. Okay? I could also change my focus. So I'm performing. I come off, let's say, come off the ice after a shift in hockey. Come off the ice. I've done something. The crowd is just all over the place, rattling me. I've let them get into my head. Now I come back off the ice, sit down, and I breathe. And I focus on just breathing, imagining my heart rate maybe slowing down, imagining the air coming through my lungs, circulating the blood. I've changed my thought process. I'm controlling my mind. I'm also enabling a relaxation. I've refocused. I've kind of cleared the mind. It's like an etch-a-sketch, right? We've all done that before. You know, you draw something, you're like, what is that? Shake it, it's gone. Same thing. Except you're not shaking your head, you're just breathing. You're refocusing, you're recentering. Okay? So that's how, from a relaxation or focus point of view. Motivation. And I put this up here. Does everybody know Christina? No, I forget her last name. I know her. Christine Nesbitt from London, yeah? Olympic medalist, right? Multiple? Yes. One of the things that she said when she was interviewed after winning her multiple medals, I said, how did you feel? She's like, I felt this before. I had already imagined myself winning 7 gold medals. If you can imagine it, you can believe it, right? Because essentially that's your reality, right? So motivation, if you want to achieve something, imagine yourself having achieved that thing. That might not guarantee that you'll get that thing, but I bet you it'll guarantee that you're going to work a lot harder and do the things that are necessary to achieve that thing. Okay? So there's the motivation. If I cannot see where I'm going to, then how am I going to get to where I'm going? Okay? And then the last piece in terms of injury, there's been a lot of work that's been done in terms of research with respect to injury and healing and pain management. Imagining the pain dissipating. Imagining my body healing itself and having blood being brought to that area of the body and all the nutrients and helping the body heal. We can get into all kinds of stuff, but not necessarily right now. Okay? So we've got a lot of different ways that you can use imagery. And imagery is extremely powerful. But the thing is that imagery, like any other skill, because it is a skill, you must practice. You must train your brain. So how do you practice it? You've already done it twice now. You've imagined the dark alley, and you've imagined your favorite sport or activity. Okay? Some of you said the reason it was easier the second time was because it was more something that you were more familiar with, something that you were passionate about. Absolutely. But I also propose that it's because you've done it now twice and it's easier to get into. Okay? Because imagery is a skill, something that you must practice. The great thing about imagery is that if I imagine something for 5 seconds, there's a learning piece in there. I don't have to do it for 5 hours. I only need to do it for a couple of seconds. And if I'm going to be training in the gym and I start to get fatigued, what happens to my training? Most of the times, if I'm going full out, and I can't lift again, is there a point of trying to lift again if I just can't do it? No. Right there? No. Okay? So your body's telling you you're fatigued, you're done. You don't try to do it again. The brain is the same thing. If I'm trying to imagine something and then I keep losing focus, my mind drifts onto something else, I try to come back and my mind drifts, that's your brain telling you, I'm tired, stop. I need a break. So stop. But the more you do it, the more practice you get, the longer you'll be able to hold the image. So clarity will be there, you'll be able to hold the image a lot longer. You will be able to see more, because most of you probably, when you did the image in your mind, when you did the imagery, it might have been some tunnel vision type stuff. You didn't see like the peripheral. It was mostly tunnel vision. The more you practice, it's like the lens opens up a little bit more. The more you see, the more you can take in. Okay? You can also start to control the speed of the image. So I can start moving, like I was talking about with the goaltender. I can pause, I can move things, I can move around within my image. I can control things a little bit more. I can also begin to work and enhance some of those senses. The hardest thing for most people is the sound. Doesn't mean that it's the hardest thing for you. But for most people, hearing or imagining a sound is pretty difficult. Right? But seeing it is very easy. So you can develop that skill with practice. Okay? So how often do you train your brain? How often do you do this stuff? The best time, really, is at night before you go to bed. Does anybody know why? I'll ask you the other question. Does anybody know why you don't want to, we tell children, for example, or anybody who wants to sleep, don't watch TV before you go to bed? Well, you're like, I had an answer, but now I don't. Yes?
You'll dream about it, won't you? You'll think about it?
You'll dream about it. You'll think about it. Because there's a couple of research, they need to do a little bit more with this. But there's a few research papers out there that say the time within about an hour and a half to 2 hours before you fall asleep, whatever you do or think about, the stuff that you do or think about during that time frame is what's going to carry over in the way that you dream. So that's why they say, well, when you watch scary movies, then you have bad dreams, it carries over. But then you can use it in a positive way. What if I fall asleep imagining playing rugby and doing all these great things? It's like more bang for my buck. I now have 8 hours of rugby. Or whatever you want. Right? Do it when you're on the bus to school. What else are you going to do? Really? Don't do it when you're driving. But then the last piece, to enhance it, to make it even stronger, start bringing in other senses. So I'll work with athletes where we'll get them to create an imagery, like a highlight reel in their mind, and they associate that particular highlight reel. For example, I have a defenseman that I work with who you imagine a lot of checking, really positive checks, because that's how he gets into the game. When he starts his first couple of shifts with really hard checks, the rest of the game follows. So we start to get a highlight reel going in his mind. He knows exactly what that highlight reel includes, and he now listens to his iPod, and there's a specific song that he listens to with that highlight, while he imagines that highlight reel. Here's the application. I get on the ice, I just start humming the tune, connected, I start to play well, because I'm going to go out and make a check. I'm going to go out and make a couple of checks. So I'm combining senses. We also combine senses when we use images of animals. I've done this with one of the rugby players that I work with. What kind of animal would you feel like, if you were an animal and you were, in order to tackle somebody, what kind of animal would you associate with that?
Lion.
Lion? Is that what you said? Rhino? Rhino? A rhino. Some people associate, a lion is a good one, because in rugby, and I'm sure in other sports where there's tackling, football, you have to come up fast, but then you've got to slow down a little bit, and then you pounce and catch your prey. But then you never let go of your prey, ever. And you take them down to the ground, right? So instead of trying to imagine and describe all of those words, what do you need to do when you tackle, how about you just imagine being a lion? When you associate what it feels like to be a lion, I don't know, but I'm sure I could figure it out. What it feels like to be a lion, I associate that image in my mind, the feeling in my body with the thing that I want to do. So you're not only using your own mind, but you're using images. Okay? So, wrapping it up, if you imagine something, if you put it in your mind, for you it's a reality. You've just created a reality. And everywhere that you go, everything that you read about inventions, about people who are geniuses, create things, they always envision it first. You can't create something if you can't have a picture of it in your mind. So create pictures, as many pictures as you want. Make them vivid, make them clear. Involve the senses. Do it over and over and over again. Create as many paths in the snow as you can. The more you create the paths in the snow, the more powerful they are, and the more likely that you're going to jump on that path the next time you see that. Now, do you have any questions? None. You're asleep. You're imagining. Any questions at all on any of the stuff that I talked about? Yes?
Can everyone visualize, or some people just blank screen?
I haven't come across anybody who has a blank screen yet, but you had a blank screen?
Yeah.
Did you?
I could hear and feel, but I don't see.
Okay.
I've never been able to visualize like imagination.
That's interesting. I haven't seen any. You too. Well, there you go. 2 people. I haven't seen any studies on that yet. Interesting, because the visual sense is the most powerful one. So usually that's the easiest one to get to. But if we're talking about the senses, then if you can incorporate all the other ones, then you're still going to be able to create that, even though it's an image, but create the feeling and create the neurological connection, right? The neuromuscular connection. So I'm not really answering your question, but that would be something to look at in terms of, definitely look in terms of research that's been done, if any at all. But I have not heard that, but now I have 2. I'm going to have to look into that. Any other questions? At all? None. Yes?
I have a problem.
You have a problem?
I
Okay.
started running at the age of 52,
Wonderful.
and I'm 57 now, and every year I'm getting a little bit slower. So when I do a 10K, like my time now is 3 minutes slower than last year's time. Same thing in the half marathon, 3 minutes slower. So as I age, even though I have a VO2 max of like a 20-year-old female, I was tested.
Pretty good.
I'm shameless. How can you help me? With somebody who's getting older, let's say, the body's capacity is only so much. Is this a kind of guarantee that if I reverse,
There are never any guarantees in life. But, and we can get into something a lot more complicated here, but I would say the first thing that, if these are things that you're already thinking about in terms of I'm getting slower every time, it would be changing that thought pattern in terms of these are things that I control, these are things that I can do to make myself perform the way I want to perform. So creating the positive images of you actually running at a pace that you want to run, and then associating with those images with words of confidence, right? And recognizing that every time that you think I'm getting slower, and it takes me longer, you notice my body language, right? And the same thing happens with you. So if you go into a race going, oh great, I'm slower than last time, well, you're going to be slower than last time, right? So it's changing the habit and the way that you're thinking so that you're now going to be a lot more confident because you're changing what's going into your mind. You're controlling, you're not allowing those other things to go in because you're replacing it with positive images, positive thoughts of what you're about to do and what you can do, and taking things that are out of your control, potentially, aging, and turning them into things that you can control. I can control my effort. I can control what I do. I can control how I think about what I do. now I'm changing my confidence with respect to that area.
Yeah, can I ask you that? I think what's difficult for folks, especially when we're younger, is a lot of people feel they can't control their thinking, especially when something negative happens, and that groove that we create with the nervous system, long-term potentiation, I think it's called, right, where you dig in those neural pathways. Some people feel that they don't have a lot of control. And what do you recommend for people who, let's say, something happens on the ice or whatever? It's like being in a car accident. You're traumatized, and you keep replaying that situation. Do you have any recommendations to get rid of that scenario?
Definitely. A lot of the work that I do, unfortunately, because of the way sports psychology is viewed still now, is that it's crisis management. Whereas it needs to be preventive. In other words, I'm training these skills so that when I face a mistake or something happens on the ice, I already have the skills to calm myself down, to put perspective, or to create perspective, have perspective on that situation, and then manage that. So take away the stress and manage that situation. Sports psychology is where strength and conditioning was maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. People didn't train for sport. They showed up on the first day, and then they got fit as the season went on, right? And I get athletes and coaches that still come to me. My team's going into playoffs tomorrow, and we're facing the biggest team and the strongest team. You need to help them. I can't, because it takes time. It's just like they would never go to a strength and conditioning coach and say, we're going into playoffs next week, we need to be faster. Fix us. Can't do it. I don't know any conditioning coach that can, a week, and make them faster. That'll have an impact. Significant impact. So, yeah, it's definitely developing those tools, developing those habits, because you can do it afterwards and train them, but in the moment, that's what happens. A lot of people are like, I can't react the way I want to react. Well, let's practice and start training you to react the way that, and you start small. So a lot of the athletes, for example, I'll work with is, let's just react. How do you react to your mom when she says such and such a thing? Well, I blow up. Okay, well, let's work on this. Let's work on breathing first. When your mom says something, breathe. But I can't. Just breathe. Just try breathing. Okay, I can start doing that. Okay, well, then let's build on the next thing. And then we put it into sport. Because sport is fairly fast in the way that it happens. And sometimes there's no time unless you've been trained to do it. Just like you wouldn't be expected to take a slap shot if you've never taken a slap shot in your life. Probably wouldn't work. Okay, there was another question somewhere, yeah.
What if you're using that thought process and you're being positive in the action, but you don't genuinely believe it? Like you're saying, I can make this shot, but you don't actually think you can do it, even though you're telling yourself that.
Great question. So there's the part of the habit, there's the part of doing it over and over again until you believe it. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but if you take, if you look at it, we've heard this before, you take a small child and you tell that child that they're dumb and they can't do things, and what are they going to start to believe? That they're dumb and they can't do it. You tell somebody that they can, keep trying, keep going, you can, you will, and the power of that self-talk and the power of that image, you will be able to. So there's a reason why you still can't believe. So it's like a keep going until you achieve, right? Keep practicing it and allow yourself to kind of surrender to that in a way and allow yourself to keep going with that belief, with that image, with that self-talk. Okay? Yes?
Okay, when somebody gets in a rut or slump, they change their game completely. They get really confused and do things that are relevant to their own game. Like to get away from their game.
Yeah.
And because one thing fails, it ingrains in the mind.
Well, a lot of times when people get into a rut, they think that the way they deal with it a lot of times is they try harder. They try to do more. As opposed to focusing on, and you cramp up and you're filling your brain with all these things that are somewhat irrelevant. You're going back to the basics. So I get this all the time. I'm in a scoring slump and I can't shoot and I can't score. What do I need to do? Well, when you do score and when you do get good shots on net, what are the things that you do? Well, I get good shots. No, think more than that. What do? I skate hard to the net. Okay. And today we're going to focus on skating hard to the net and getting to open ice. Don't worry about shooting, don't worry about scoring. Skate hard, get to the net, get to open ice. The puck will find you. You know how to play hockey. You've scored before. You know how to do it. So it's bringing back to basics, going back to what are the things that you do to enable that to happen as opposed to focusing on the outcome of putting the puck in the net. Make sense?
Hi everybody. On behalf of the Social Science faculty in the School of Language and Liberal Studies, we'd like to say thank you to Natascha for attending. Hold on. And I'd also like you to envision attending the Social Science Speaker Series in the winter term. Thank you.